What if the most dangerous animal in the American wilderness is the one that watches us back, the one we refuse to see? For more than a century, a shadow has stalked the edges of our maps and the corners of our fears. We call it by a simple name, a name born from a single, impossible footprint: Bigfoot. But before the headlines, before the grainy films, the legend had other names. It was woven into the very fabric of the continent. In the ancient forests of the Pacific Northwest, long before European settlers arrived, indigenous peoples told stories of giant bipedal creatures that lived deep within the woods. These were not stories of a single monster, but of a pantheon of diverse beings, each with its own name, nature, and purpose. The Coast Salish spoke of the Sasquatch, a term simply meaning wild man.
What did they learn?
The Quackawakawak feared Sonequa, a giant, hair-covered ogress who stole food and children from their villages. Further east, the Algonquin tribes whispered of the Wetiko, or Wendigo, a far more malevolent spirit, representing the terrors of winter and greed. Yet for other nations, like the Ojibwe, the Rougarou was seen as a messenger, an apparition that appeared in times of danger to warn humanity to change its ways. These beings could be guardians of nature, malevolent monsters, or profound spiritual teachers. The modern Bigfoot legend did not emerge from a vacuum. It grew from the soil of these ancient, complex beliefs. However, the process of its modern birth involved a transformation, a flattening of this rich spiritual tapestry into something simpler, something more palatable for the modern world: a single, undiscovered animal. The legend wasn't merely adopted, it was rebranded for a new audience. The modern chapter of the legend begins not with a sighting, but a scar upon the earth. The date is August 27th, 1958. The place, Bluff Creek, a remote logging area in Northern California. A bulldozer operator named Jerry Crew arrives at his work site to find something deeply unsettling. Circled around his machine are enormous 16-inch footprints pressed deep into the soil. The loggers had already been unnerved by strange events: a 450-pound drum of diesel fuel seemingly tossed into a ravine, a massive spare tire moved without explanation. The men at the camp gave the mysterious trackmaker a simple, descriptive nickname: Bigfoot, 2 words. For weeks, it remained a local curiosity, a campfire story. But the tale reached Andrew Genzoli, a columnist for the Humboldt Times. He published the story, and later, when Crew made a plaster cast of one of the prints, Genzoli arranged for a photograph. It was this image, an earnest, hard-working man holding tangible proof of the impossible, that ignited a firestorm. Genzoli, sensing a story with national appeal, made a crucial editorial decision. He fused the nickname into a single, powerful word he believed would play better in newspapers: Bigfoot. The legend wasn't born in the forest, it was manufactured in a newsroom. A local ghost story was packaged for mass consumption, launched into the public consciousness by the power of a single photograph. A name and a face. Bigfoot became a phenomenon. The years that followed became a golden age of encounters, each story more detailed and terrifying than the last. The legend wasn't just growing, it was competing with itself for sensationalism. In 1957, a prospector named Albert Ostman came forward with a story he claimed happened in 1924. While camping alone in British Columbia, he said he was scooped up in his sleeping bag by a massive male Sasquatch and held captive for 6 days by a family of the creatures. His escape, he claimed, was only possible after the patriarch of the family fell ill from eating his snuff tobacco. 2 years earlier, in 1955, William Rowe swore in an affidavit to his own encounter on Mica Mountain. He described a 6-foot-tall female creature covered in brown silver-tipped hair with long arms and visible breasts. He was so struck by its lifelike appearance that he concluded it would be impossible to fake such a specimen. This account was pivotal, helping to shift the public image of the creature from a wild man to a distinct ape-like species. But the most harrowing tale came from a group of miners on Mount St. Helens, also in 1924. The incident became known as the Ape Canyon Attack. After one of the miners fired his rifle at a 7-foot ape man, their cabin was besieged all night long. They described a terrifying ordeal, the sound of booming thumps like a giant beating its chest, a shrill, peculiar whistling that echoed between the ridges, and then the assault. Boulders rained down on their small cabin, hitting the walls with a sickening bang as the entire structure shook violently. The miners huddled inside, firing into the darkness as the creatures tried to break down their door. It was a night of pure terror that cemented Bigfoot's reputation not just as a mystery, but as a potential threat. All these stories, the footprints, the abductions, the attacks, were building towards a single, defining moment. A moment that would burn itself into the collective unconscious. October 20th, 1967, Bluff Creek, California. The very same area where Jerry Crew found his tracks 9 years earlier. 2 amateur Bigfoot hunters, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin, were riding on horseback along the creek bed. As they rounded a bend, their horses suddenly reared in panic. There, across the creek, was a large, hairy, bipedal figure walking away from them. Scrambling to free his rented 16mm camera from his saddlebag, Patterson began running, filming as he went. The resulting 59.5 seconds of footage are perhaps the most analyzed, debated, and controversial in the history of cryptozoology. It shows a female creature covered in dark, reddish-brown hair with prominent breasts and a powerful, fluid stride unlike a human's. Then it happens. The creature turns its head and torso, casting a single, fleeting glance back at the camera before disappearing into the trees. Patterson would later describe that look as one of contempt and disgust. This single image, known as Frame 352, became the face of the legend. The film's power lies not in its clarity, but in its perfect, maddening ambiguity. It is too detailed to be easily dismissed as a man in a cheap suit, yet too grainy and surrounded by questionable circumstances to be accepted as definitive proof. It is a cultural Rorschach test. What you see in that frame is a reflection of your own willingness to believe. The film didn't solve the mystery. It became the mystery. For decades, that film has been the bedrock of belief. But when we place the evidence under the microscope, the foundation begins to crack. Proponents, including anthropologists like Grover Krantz and Jeff Meldrum, argue the creature's proportions, visible muscle flexion, and unique, compliant gait are anatomically non-human and would have been impossible to fake in 1967. But skeptics point to the confession of a man named Bob Hieronymus, who claimed for years that he was the one inside the suit, a modified gorilla costume with football shoulder pads made from a horse's hide. And what of the footprints that started it all, the ones found by Jerry Crew? It was later revealed that his boss, Ray Wallace, was a notorious prankster. After his death, his family found a pair of giant carved wooden feet he had used to create fake tracks for years. The very origin of the modern myth was itself a hoax. Other physical evidence follows a similar pattern. In 2000, the Skookum cast, a massive body impression found in a mud wallow, was hailed as proof. Believers saw the detailed imprint of a primate, but scientists pointed out that the impression perfectly matched that of a reclining elk, a common animal in the area. Hair samples found at the scene were confirmed to be from an elk. Even the audio evidence is questionable. The Sierra sounds, a series of eerie howls and clicks recorded in the 1970s, are presented as genuine Bigfoot vocalizations. While unsettling, no audio recording has ever been scientifically proven to come from an unknown primate, and experts note how easily the calls of known animals like coyotes or owls can be misidentified in the dark. The entire case for Bigfoot rests on a collection of evidence that always seems to crumble under scrutiny. This leads believers to a common refrain: absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. They argue the creature is simply too intelligent, too elusive to be caught. But this creates a closed logical loop, an unfalsifiable argument where the lack of proof is reframed as proof of the creature's legendary cunning. If the physical evidence is so weak, why do the sightings persist? The answer may lie not in the forest, but within our own minds. There are, of course, deliberate hoaxes, from the 1884 Jacko newspaper story, which was admitted to be fiction shortly after publication, to the tragic death of Randy Lee Tenley in 2012, who was struck by a car while attempting to stage a Bigfoot sighting in a ghillie suit. Then there is simple misidentification. A black bear rising on its hind legs in the twilight can create a startlingly humanoid silhouette. Its hind paw, overlapping the print of its front paw, can produce a single elongated track that looks eerily like a giant human foot. But the most powerful explanation is psychological. Our brains are wired to find patterns. This tendency, called pareidolia, is why we see faces in clouds or a monstrous figure in the random play of shadow and light in a dark forest. This is compounded by confirmation bias. If you go into the woods hoping to find Bigfoot, you are more likely to interpret a broken branch or a strange sound as evidence confirming your belief. In the isolation and fear of the deep wilderness, our own minds can become the most convincing storytellers. In the 21st century, the hunt for Bigfoot has moved online. The internet has created a thriving digital subculture with dedicated forums, YouTube channels, and subreddits like r/Bigfoot, where believers can share evidence and reinforce their convictions, often in echo chambers where skepticism is discouraged.
But this digital age presents a profound paradox. We live in a world where nearly every person carries a high-definition video camera in their pocket. It should be easier than ever to capture definitive proof. Yet the evidence has not improved. The photos remain blurry, the videos shaky. For skeptics, this lack of clear proof in an age of ubiquitous surveillance is the most compelling argument that the creature simply does not exist. The internet has given the legend its biggest platform, but it has also exposed its greatest weakness.
So, where does that leave us? We are faced with a century of sincere, often terrified eyewitness testimony on one hand, and a complete and total lack of hard physical proof on the other. For many, Bigfoot represents something more than an animal. He is a symbol of the untamed wild, a remnant of a world that existed before our cities and machines, a guardian of a nature we have tried so hard to conquer. Perhaps the belief persists because we need it to. We need to believe there is still mystery left in the world. For over a century, we have searched the deep woods for a monster. We've found footprints, recorded strange sounds, and captured a fleeting, ghostly image on film. We have analyzed, debated, and debunked. But in all our searching, we failed to answer the most fundamental question. Is Bigfoot a flesh and blood creature, hiding just beyond the limits of our perception? Or is it something else entirely? A shadow cast by our own collective psyche, a ghost that haunts the wilderness of the American mind. Perhaps the real question isn't whether we will ever find Bigfoot, but whether we can ever truly escape him. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, do share.